come to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mandy, could you please call the roll?
Here.
Here. Butler.
Here.
Carlstone.
Present.
Hopkins.
Here.
Bianstreet.
Here. City Council has adopted a code of civility. As elected officials, we pledge to promote civility through extending respect to others, listening to understand, disagreeing without disrespect, engaging collaboratively, and speaking up to address incivility. Just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and broadcast for on Pella TV. Anyone who wishes to speak to council must approach that podium with a microphone before speaking, so that those listening at home can hear your comments and see you on camera. Can I get a motion for approval of the tentative agenda?
So
Support.
Van Strylen, Branderhorst, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Bianstreet.
yes.
Branderhorst. Yes. Butler.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Bianstreet.
Yes.
Motion passed. This time we have an opportunity for public forum. Anyone wishing to address council regarding any agenda item, please come to that microphone, state your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll move on. Can I get a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Branderhorst and Strylen. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Branderhorst. Yes. Bianstreet.
Yes.
Bianstreet.
Yes.
Butler.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes. Motion passed. Moving on to public hearing on the proposal to approve the First Amendment to hangar lease with Vermeer Manufacturing Company. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. For those in attendance and those watching at home on Pella Fiber, I'd like to direct your attention to the big board for a brief presentation on this item. Mayor DeWard stated what this resolution would do this evening would approve the First Amendment to the Vermeer Corporation's hangar lease at the Pella Municipal Airport. It is important to note on January 6th of this year, the council did approve an assignment agreement which transferred Weiler's Transportation Incorporated lease to the Vermeer Corporation. So what this amendment is doing is bringing the lease up to the latest terms that have been previously approved by the City Council for other ground leases at the Pella Municipal Airport. There's two basic items that we have to address this evening. First one, as far as the lease amendment, is the increase in the annual rent from $1,000 up to $5,442. This would be effective on May 1st, 2026. This is also consistent with this 30 cents per square foot, which we previously approved for the Pella Corporation ground lease that we had as well. And then two, probably a bigger driver with it, just with the rate itself, is also we've adjusted the land lease area on this. Previously under the Weiler lease, it was just the hangar area. Now it's been expanded out to the area that's actually being used by aviation purposes by Vermeer Corporation. So those are the two adjustments that we have this evening, Mr. Mayor. And with that, staff is recommending approval of the proposed amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Any written comments?
No written comments.
Council comments? Comments from anyone in the audience? All right, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Support.
Vanstra, Hopkins, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Bianstreet.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Bianstreet.
Yes.
Branderhorst. Yes. Butler.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6997, entitled Resolution Approving and Authorizing Execution of a First Amendment to Hangar Lease by and between the City of Pella and Vermeer Manufacturing Company. Assume nothing to add, so is there a motion for approval?
So moved. Support.
Van Strylen, Hopkins, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Bianstreet.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Bianstreet.
Yes.
Branderhorst. Yes. Butler.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6998, entitled Resolution Approving Construction Contract and Bond for the Community Center Alley Reconstruction. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. As Mayor DeWard stated, what this resolution would do was actually approve the construction contract as well as performance bond for the Community Center Alley Reconstruction Project. And we do have listed up on the board, the highlighted area is the community center alleyway project, and it does abut both the Pella Public Library and the community center as well. As background on this request, on January 20th, the City Council did award the project to Pella Concrete Contractors in the amount of $276,090.25. Now, the documents this evening, when you talk about the construction contract as well as performance bond, have been approved by the city attorney, and staff is recommending approval this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
Brander, Horace, Hopkins, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Braderhorst.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Van Strylen.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Butler.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 6999, entitled Resolution Fixing Date for a Public Hearing on a Proposed First Amendment to Hangar Lease between the City of Pella and Weiler Transportation, Inc., and providing for publication of notice thereof. Mike?
I guess, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. The big takeaway from this is all we're simply doing is establishing the public hearing date for a proposed amendment to the Weiler Transportation Incorporated ground lease at the Pella Municipal Airport. It's shown in yellow up on the big board. As background on this, on January 6th of this year, Council approved an assignment of the Vermeer hangar lease to Weiler Transportation Incorporated. Now, as far as the details of this lease, what we're trying to do is be consistent between the tenants that hold ground leases at the Pella Municipal Airport. So it's very similar to the Vermeer lease that was approved earlier this evening, or the amendment rather. And this particular one will be discussing an increase in the annual rent from $1,000 up to $4,935. And once again, this is based on 30 cents per square foot, which has previously been approved by the Pella City Council. And we're also adjusting the lease map as well to reflect the area being leased by Weiler. And with that, Mr. Mayor, once again, all we're simply doing is establishing February 17th as the public hearing date for this item, and staff is recommending approval this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved. Support.
Van Strylen, Hopkins, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Van Strylen.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Braderhorst.
Yes.
Butler.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Resolution number 7000, entitled Resolution Fixing Date for a Public Hearing on a Proposed Ground Lease between the City of Pella and Classic Aviation, Inc., and providing for publication of notice thereof. Mike?
Hey, Mr. Mayor, very similar resolution to the previous one approved by the Pella City Council, except in this case, we're talking about a new ground lease with Classic Aviation that is also the FBO, and they also perform management services for the City of Pella at the Pella Municipal Airport. A little bit of background on this. On January 6th, Council once again approved Vermeer, the assignment of the Vermeer hangar lease to Weiler Transportation Incorporated. Subsequently, Weiler has sold a portion of, or actually they're one of the hangars, to Classic Aviation. They've come to an agreement on terms for a sale on that as well. And so what we're doing with that is we're separating off the Classic Aviation lease from the Weiler lease that's currently it's under. And so that's the reason for the new ground lease, but the terms that is being offered to Classic Aviation is very similar to Weiler, Vermeer, and Pella Corporation as well. The two big ones, just to be consistent and briefly on this, is the annual lease rent is once again based on 30 cents per square foot. That equates to $4,935 per year, and once again, that payment will be due on May 1st of this year with that. So with this, again, all we're simply doing is establishing February 17th as the public hearing date for the proposed ground lease of Classic Aviation.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
Brander, Horace, Hopkins, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Braderhorst.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Van Strylen.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Butler.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Motion passed. Can I get a motion for approval of abstract of bills number 2192?
Move to approve and issue warrants.
Support.
Brander, Horace, Van Strylen, any discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Braderhorst.
Yes.
Van Strylen.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Butler.
Yes.
Carlstone.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Motion passed. Any council member have any other business you'd like to have addressed this evening? Any member of the public have any other business that you'd like to have the council, or address the council with this evening? If so, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and address, Please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Ann Summit, 1435 Hazel Street. As many of you know, we live kind of in the hot zone right now of Timberview. And I see that there's a traffic analysis coming up in a minute for policy and planning. A couple of things I just want to bring to your attention is this is not a traffic issue that I see, it's more of a safety issue with the second plat coming online. The other thing is there is a lot of speed on the street right now, just be aware of that. We have had some times where we cannot get out of our street, especially during the heavy times. I know that lost semi last year, do you remember that one? When it had to be ushered out of town, it came down and we could not get in or out for a long period of time. And so people who are living on part of that road can't get out. And I did see it referenced in here about Country Club. And Country Club's not open to Timberview at all. It's a dead end, so it's just Hazel Street. So I'd like that to be taken into consideration, as well as when this was being initially talked about, we were told it was in the comprehensive plan to put another exit in on North Main. And it's my understanding that a bridge would have to go in there due to a large area that goes over a creek. I know that's gonna be expensive, but I really feel like the citizens of Pella deserve, especially in that area, safety to get in and out. There's already approximately 70 houses in there right now, just with one entrance and exit. You bring in 51 more lots, there's gonna be 121. We need another entrance and exit there. It's just not safe at all. We were told that that bridge and that second entrance would go in prior to Plat 2 being started. The other thing is how many other areas in this town have only one entrance and exit, and how many homes are on those. So I think just for public safety, this is just an issue I wanted to bring to your attention. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, we're going to adjourn to policy and planning, and our first, are we going in this order? I heard you say.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll
So our first one is that traffic analysis for Timberview Plat 2 development.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, as Mayor DeWard stated with tonight's policy and planning session, we discussing phase 2 of the Timberview development and actually future phases of the Timberview development. When we talk about phase 2, after we approved phase 1 was approximately 37 homes in the Timberview development, and the development's done really well. The developers would like to proceed with phase 2. Now, just for reference purposes, when we look at phase 2, this generally up here, the Hazel Street extension, this area right here is phase 1 of the development. Phase 2 is this area that's being contemplated down here by the developers over here as well. So when we look at phase 2 is approximately an additional 51 homes. Now, based on staff's notes of the development, when the development phase 1 was originally approved, what council directed staff is before any additional phases on the Timberview development, council wanted to have an analysis on the extension of Hazel Street over to Fountain View Drive, what was shown in the city's comprehensive plan. So Heidi and Mandy, if we can go ahead, please, and show up the comprehensive plan extension. This comes from 2014, but in the city's comprehensive plan, we do have an extension at that time of East Park Lane over to Fountain View Drive on this as well. And that's how the development was originally structured at Timberview when we look at the overall concept. So let's go ahead and focus and refer back to the map. Now, when we look at the overall concept map for Timberview, it's about 181 homes that would be planned with all 3 phases of the development. So what staff did in preparation for this evening is we hired Greenwood Consulting to do a traffic analysis on Timberview developments with the questions for Mr. Bob Beedster to take a look at the traffic impacts on phase 2 of the development, future phases of the development, the traffic impacts on Hazel Street, Country Club Drive, and also to make a determination if the extension of Hazel Street over to Main Street was necessary, as well as were required before future phases of the development. So with that, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Bob Beedster is here this evening, and I'd like to have Bob go ahead and review his findings with the council.
Mike, can I just ask one question for clarification?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned phase 2 a lot, but when you look at the map, is it really Plat 2?
It's Plat 2.
And that includes these three phases here, or just the one where it says, because the map in our packet has, I don't see phase 2 having 51 houses on it.
Well, yeah, it just shows 2, 3, 4.
If I can answer that, the map shows phases 2, 3, and 4, but they've lumped it together for
It's
one
plat 2?
project.
Okay.
That is plat 2, so that's 51 homes.
So when we're
2, 3,
talking
4.
about it, it's the existing one, then everything off to the southwest of that is plat 2, and then everything off, they show off to the northeast is their future phase, so. Just to kind of highlight a little bit about what we were asked to look at was primarily focusing on whether the connection from Hazel up to Maine, whether it's in Fountain View or wherever it might be, was gonna be necessary and how would it function. The one thing I would note is from the original concept that we saw for this Plat 2 area, they only did not have a connection to Country Club. Now, if you look at it, they've extended that street, so we now have a connection at the north end of Hazel and at the north end of Country Club. The majority of the lots in this Plat 2 actually will probably go down Country Club simply because that's the closest way rather than going north and back around. One thing about drivers is you can tell them where to go, but they're gonna go where they perceive to be the shortest and fastest route. We can, people are a little hard to convince that going north to go south is really what you need to do. So when you look at it, they're clearly, this plat will have an impact on Hazel and an impact on Country Club. The majority of the traffic will probably utilize Country Club because that's the closest route. If they're gonna go farther south, they're gonna continue the current pattern of probably trying to go down Hazel. If they're going more to the west or down toward the square, they're gonna cut over probably on Elm Street and go down Main Street. So the question was really primarily whether the extension, whether that would actually divert much traffic from going south to go back up north and back come down on Main Street. If you look at the travel times, if you're living on Hazel Street, you're probably gonna go either south on Hazel or south to Hazel and west on Elm rather than going up around. If you're living on the area that exits out onto Country Club, you're gonna end up on Elm Street, and then you can either go east to Hazel or west to Main Street. One of the challenges of the city as it's grown northerly is it's grown between those two valleys. And so everything is pinched in where your primary north-south corridors are Hazel and Main. And as you go farther to the north, it simply exacerbated that problem. So if you look at the short-term question of the 51 lots, the traffic volumes on the streets, Country Club and Hazel, north of Elm, will remain well within what would be considered suitable levels. Now that isn't to say that there isn't gonna be more traffic, and the more traffic always raises the issue of safety and how well does traffic flow. Because there is parking on those streets, so the more traffic, you're gonna have more people to dodge around. It becomes more of a challenge, but within what would be considered acceptable engineering standards, they remain well within the limits of it. So the question really is whether or not extending that street would relieve the traffic on Country Club and Hazel. If you look at the logistics and the layout, it probably would not. One thing it would do is if you got residents that are in the Big Rock Park Road area northerly on the west side of Elm that are kind of looking to go southeast or south, they may actually have more of a tendency to cut down through Hazel than they would be to go down Main and over on Elm or all the way down to the square and then continue on. So looking at it, it's not likely that connector would relieve much of the traffic out of Plat 2 and may actually have a reverse impact. Now, if we look at the future phase, that's 84 lots, that's got a single connection, and that's well over the limit. If you look at the International Fire Code, they recommend that any over 30 residents, single-family residents, have 2 access points. Plat 2 now does have that because it brings a second access point into Timberview, but the future plat does not. And so, as it's currently configured, I'm not sure that the city really should be in a position of approving that. And we've met with the developer and expressed to them the concern that there needs to be a second access point out of that future phase to try to draw traffic away. Now, the challenge is right now, there's no place to go. If you bring it back down, it's all gonna function back down to the Hazel Elm main corridor. As was mentioned earlier in Mike's presentation, the comp plan calls for an east-west corridor. One of the things the city needs to consider, and it's gonna be a longer term, is do we need to pull some of the traffic that's going east and west rather than straight south? Do we need to pull those away from that corridors of Main Street and Hazel Street? So if you're gonna go to the West Washington area, right now your choice is you go south and then you go west. The comp plan shows that heading over to the west and then south. The issue, I think, as much, and this will be, a subject of a future, maybe a future discussion with the council, is the Fountain View, is that the right corridor or is that too far north? Because again, if you're gonna go south, how far north do people wanna go? You've gotta make that a faster route. So there's some longer term issues, really, we need to look at. How do we get that east-west connectivity to pull some of that traffic over to the West Washington area, and then also to get it over to Vermeer, the schools, the rec center, so that isn't all driving south on Hazel and getting all, the traffic tie-up that occurs in the morning and the afternoon at Hazel and University. So there are some longer term issues that we need to address, but in the short term, it's obviously the council's decision, but I don't believe the analysis shows that the connection to Main Street at this time would actually provide much relief to the south. It may actually draw more traffic coming south from the west side of Main Street than it would be people deciding they're gonna go north to Main. Because, if you look at driver habits, most of them are gonna go south. If they're gonna go to Main, they're gonna cut over on Elm and not go north. So, be glad to answer any questions. And again, we've talked to the developer and suggested to them that we need to look at that future plat, because as it's presented now, that does create a much bigger problem.
I guess my concern would be if I were living in that area, don't wait too long for that east corridor, because certain things like the sidewalk on Hazel was gonna be completed before all those houses started, but it didn't get in. So if you start building that road, winter house is gonna go in that future site. So if we wait to build the road and all of a sudden we have all kinds of houses there already and there's no road, then the people living on Hazel or on Country Club, it's gonna get busier and busy. So I guess I feel maybe the time is now to start working on that road. And now you say traffic may be used there, but they're used to other routes. It may not be that busy. I guess I don't know if we ought to wait too long for that east-west corridor. I think we ought to start thinking about it now.
Yeah, I'd comment that Hazel Street's not built for a lot more traffic than it currently has, in my opinion. I've walked up and down that street a lot, and it's not wide enough to park a car on and pass, so I don't think there's any parking on it. But there's no left turn lanes, there's places where people wanna turn left, and if you put a lot more traffic on that street, you're gonna have more backups. And I will say, probably in Pella, we're a little bit spoiled about traffic, but we don't wanna get to where we're hating it. That's what I'd say. So, and what's the terrain like going west from the top end here of Hazel, going west over to Main? What is that?
There's a relatively large draw wooded. If you look on the drawing area, you can see the wooded area. That's just the creek valley. So It does have some topographic challenges. What this development is, it's sort of the knob between a couple of different creek valleys. So you've got one off to the east and one off to the, kind of to the northwest. This is sort of built up on the plateau. I mentioned earlier that there's, the city as it's gone north is basically built on the plateau areas between various creeks. You got one off to the east, you got this branch that heads off to the northeast. But if you go looking over to the west, you got the creek that runs through Big Rock Park. And if you go farther to the north, they almost join. So we're getting up to the point where the city's ability to grow north is gonna be limited. But, you fill in the top of these little plateaus, and it all drives it back down to we don't have much east-west connectivity. We drive it all back south on Hazel, Main, secondarily to Broadway.
I wonder if we should look at a bypass farther north, looping clear around the city and the future city, where the city's gonna go, and take Hazel up there and hook in there, and then people from the west can't get to this outlet without coming down this bypass, which would be a little bit farther north.
Yeah, I mean, there does, I mean, if you look at the idea of a bypass, a north bypass, it really needs to go from probably 240th on the east, somewhere over to 218th Place on the west, so that you can go over to the east, avoid all the developed area, go south on 240th, or go west and down, get over to West Washington area on 218th or somewhere in that area. The concern is that you've gotta find a location that's both buildable and usable. So if you go too far to the north, you have to have a corridor that convinces people that it's fast enough to go what they perceive to be out of the way to go around it. So, whether you drive that bypass, down Fountain View, which is gonna, theoretically turn that road into something that wasn't designed for. It wasn't designed as the local arterial street. So you gotta be careful we don't move the problem from one area to another area. But the comments about, how quickly you can build all of the east-west road, that's a question yet to be determined. But I do agree wholeheartedly that we need to probably find that alignment, agree on that alignment, and start moving in that direction. My concern right now is that, is Fountain View the right location? Because that's gonna be reevaluated as a part of the comp plan.
To me, the way that future potential Fountain View goes, my opinion is that it wouldn't take traffic away from Hazel. It would just take Fountain Hills, and that'd be another shortcut to get onto Hazel and go to school or Revere or whatever, and actually make the problem worse.
That's what you have to watch, is that you have to make sure that when you build streets that you don't attract things that you don't intend to. I mean, we're not ready to turn this area into one-way streets to force them to go north. But that's, the concern is if you've got a way, if we can get traffic over and they can get over to say 240th and avoid going down Hazel, that probably provides some benefit because it takes you over to close to where a lot of that traffic going down Hazel now goes. The Main Street corridor, you can always have that going to the central business area. And then longer term, it's gonna be a little bit more a challenge to get it off to West Washington to avoid driving all that traffic back down to the square. That doesn't need to go through it. So I think you've got a short term, take a look at Plat 2, but in doing so, we wanted to make sure we looked at and raised that issue of, there's some longer term issues that we need to look at to draw that traffic away, because I agree, Hazel is not designed for the purpose for which it's now functioning, which is sort of the alternate to Main Street for the north-south traffic.
This is a good reminder of why good comprehensive planning is important. So I have a question about timing with when our new comprehensive plan is to be fully cooked in relationship to Plot 2's ideal timeline. Can we fold those two together?
question, what we've talked about internally was working with on the transportation. We're currently working on the long-term transportation component for the comprehensive plan. The plan itself, I believe, will be presented for council's formal consideration sometime in May and June of this year. But our thoughts were is to work with the consultant, work with Bob on the east-west connector, work with the developer, then circle back to the developer. Because frankly, if we change the alignment of Hazel Street over to Main Street, that may impact even phase 2 of this development. And so the developer is aware of that, and that would be our recommendation, is we work on the east-west connection to Main Street first, then we work with the developer, then we have another session on what I would call Plat 2 or phases 2, 3, and 4 on this development as well. But again,
Yeah,
Bob's
just-
recommendation is to work on that alignment first.
Right. If you look at the far north end of Hazel where it kind of curves up there, it's designed to drive that traffic. That east-west connector is intended to come down Hazel and then go east. That may or may not be the most efficient way of doing it, because we don't want to drive all that traffic. So we've started a conversation with the developer about maybe you can work on everything with that far north end of Hazel Street and give us a few months to figure out what that alignment is. Because maybe there's an alignment that doesn't bring all that east-west connector back through Timberview. Or maybe it kind of cuts over and they reconfigure phase 2 to try to encourage that east-west traffic and don't make it so easy for people to scoot back down Hazel Street. So trying to find out how do we have the east-west connector and not have the unintended consequence, okay, I've got an east-west connector, but somebody's gonna jump off and run down Hazel Street. So trying to get it so that we encourage them, if they're going east, to go east and don't cut down Hazel Street. If that makes sense. So right now, the way that's configured, the only way that east-west connector would have to come back through down Hazel and then continue east. So maybe there's a way that it cuts more through that future phase to get the second access for that point, and then try to discourage the long-term traffic from coming south on Hazel.
And just to be clear, just this Plat 2 that we're talking about,
Right.
not the future, that is by standards, just adding the connection to Country Club is enough as it sits, just
That's-
not
yeah.
the future.
Yeah, what I'm referring to in Plat 2 is that if you see the little curve up in that far north end, maybe they hold back on that to give us some chance to say, is this the right alignment? Or maybe there's a better alignment that addresses the future plat and doesn't drive all that traffic down Hazel, and then give people the encouragement to keep going south, to try to pull that off farther to the east, so they'd have to loop back around and make it more difficult, more challenging to just cut down Hazel Street. And try to encourage them to get over off of Hazel and get over to the connector to 240th, if that makes sense. Trying to just, recognize that this plat alone doesn't really, is difficult to solve, but there is a bigger issue of the traffic on Hazel Street, just because it's functioning for a purpose for which it was not really intended, was to be kind of the second north-south collector street in the city.
So I really appreciated the analysis you gave us, because I know when we talked about this with phase 1 of this development, we talked about trying to have something going north and back to the west. And I was thinking that a second outlet, but after reading your analysis and what you said, makes a whole lot of sense that if we did that now without a longer-term solution on an east-west, it would exacerbate the traffic to Hazel, because I guarantee you that what you're saying is right. People that live in Fountain Hills, if a road came off of Fountain View Drive to here, they're gonna take that every time to go to the school and go to the rec center and everything else. So, but I think for our discussion tonight, we're talking about this Plat 2,
Yeah.
Right.
which the developer is ready to go on, is the way I understand it. They feel like they're ready. And what you're saying is with the adding access through Country Club Drive for this area, along with the Hazel, all of your engineering numbers say there's no, it's well within engineering to do that. So I think that's what we need to think about tonight, is that's what we're doing. We're adding Country Club Drive, and I think part of that, opening up Country Club Drive to this phase will alleviate a lot of excess traffic on Hazel. Whereas if we went with the road out to hook into Main Street, is gonna just increase traffic on Hazel. That makes sense. So I've never thought about that before. That's why we hire guys like you that know what they're doing. And so I also think that part of, and Harold mentioned this or somebody mentioned with the sidewalk on Hazel Street, I also think that part of this, if we're going to approve this Plat 2, opening up Country Club Drive, we also need to get a sidewalk on Country Club Drive at the same time.
Absolutely.
And then I think, based on your analysis and everything, I think we're fine. And for the future stuff, yes, but we need to do that anyway. We need a much more comprehensive traffic up there.
It doesn't view this, the future in isolation, but actually views it.
Yeah, and I think in our comprehensive plan, that's gonna happen. There's a lot of challenges going east and west. I mean, if you go down Big Rock Road, you think, but then you run into Big Rock Park. What are you gonna do there? You can't go through Big Rock Park. Going back the other, so there's a lot of challenges with east and west.
Yeah, I think this will help, but I think we have to be careful. When we go to this future, I think we have to be very careful. If we start building houses before we have any alternate streets, I think we have to put a kibosh on it.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I don't think we're talking about that future development now. We're talking about this Plat 2, and I think with Country Club Drive, being part of this, I think we're okay there, but.
I would say what I'm hearing from Bob is that all of Plat 2 isn't quite fully cooked yet. That phase 3, or phase 2 portion on the north isn't engineered correctly yet. Because it's assuming that we're coming out the way we're all.
Yeah, there's still, I think, there's maybe some adjustment will happen yet on the north end of that phase.
Plat 2 is fully ready yet, but I think I'm hearing your suggestion, and we need to go back to the drawing board on that northern section of that Plat 2.
Well, I don't know if they need to necessarily. We need to figure out what we're gonna do with east-west streets first. That's a city issue more than it is a
And
development
that
issue.
leads me to another question about just the flow of how this works. So they purchase the property, they're an engineering firm, they do the engineering. Are they required in their original planning to comply with any sort of city issue, or does that just come up when we are now considering the plat and we have to apply it to our comprehensive ideas?
Just
You
if
know,
I can.
Bob, if you want to take a chance, I'll answer that after Bob, so.
The city has to, the developers have to comply with the city's requirements. So if we have a transportation plan or a comp plan that sets forth an articulable standard or requirement, then we can require them to comply with that. So, for example, we come up with let's say there's an east-west corridor that cuts through, I'm just gonna take, through the future phase. We can make them comply with that or deny it. Where we have a difficulty is when we don't have anything as a standard, then it's hard to say, well, we just don't like that. But if we can pick the alignment for the east-west corridor, then anybody who develops along that corridor has to comply with that provision. And it functions very well when you have that. May not get every piece of it built right away, but at least that's a standard that staff can then hold developers to, and we can maybe head off some of those issues before they get to the council, when the council says, well, that isn't really what we had in mind, if that makes sense.
But won't that make that difficult for the developer on the northwest corner of Plat 2 if we don't know what that east-west corridor is yet?
That's the conversation we've had with the developer a couple of weeks ago was, can you work on everything but that little northwest sliver while we work through the transportation plan with the idea that we'll have something by, say, June. It may not be exactly in there, but that sort of syncs with the comp plan, and the developer didn't have a big pushback on saying, yeah, we've got things we can do. They can still get about the same number of lots, they just have to tweak the street alignment to maybe give us a little flexibility, or maybe, they can move forward, with everything but that far end. If you look at it, it's just that little sliver that comes off of the north end. So things to, we're still gonna work with them, even if the plat goes forward, we wanna make sure that it fits how the city's long-term plan is, given we're only a few months away from deciding what that plan's gonna be, so that we can, then we have that tool to say, look, we've got a road going through here, you've gotta connect to it, we don't wanna have something, we don't wanna have a road and then have their development not connect to it correctly. Or we don't wanna have to bend our east-west corridor to fit something we could have avoided, if that makes sense.
So right now, the extension of Hazel Street, it just goes, you come up and it starts bending back to the west, and there's that start of the street that goes off to the northeast. So it's just past there right now, right?
Yeah, it's basically goes up just kind of around, just past.
So that for this Plat 2, then you would be extending Hazel from where it ends now, just past that street.
Mhm.
I don't know how many feet that is up there, but that allows access to the cul-de-sac down, coming back south. So what you're saying is the very farthest northwest part of that maybe needs to be adjusted?
Yeah, may turn a little bit
Yeah,
differently
okay.
if we don't, because I'm not convinced that the best alignment would take that east-west connector down through the development. Because what you're doing then is you're driving people to come back down to what would be the north end of Hazel before Timberview was built. That may just give them an incentive to keep going south. So trying to get it so that we don't offer any traffic incentives we don't intend. So we can, if they just flip that around and make it a little bit more perpendicular, if the road goes up, they can probably work with that. If it goes north of that, they can tie in as a T intersection and head over into the future phase. So it just gives us some flexibility, and I don't think it really has a big impact on them.
Yeah.
Theirs was
sense.
all
That makes
driven
sense.
around the concept of we're gonna have a road following the comp plan that would go up to Main Street. May not be exactly what comes out,
Okay.
given the experience over the last couple of years.
That makes sense. So for developers is anxious and ready to go with phase 2, or Plat 2, not phase 2, Plat 2. So for our discussion purposes tonight, you kind of need to know if council is going to bless this phase, or Plat 2. So that's what.
Not as currently drawn.
Yeah, you're.
But it makes sense to the south.
So it could be a little bit of tweak, but I think what's important is that we understand Country Club Drive comes into play with this phase, so that gives you another in and out, with what we Hazel. And I know we talked about the second outlet going north, when we talked about phase 1, but based on Bob's analysis, I think that would exacerbate the problem more than it'd help the problem. So I think at this point, that wouldn't make any sense to talk about that.
At least per the past comp plan.
Yeah.
Sidewalks real quickly, is country club more amenable to sidewalking on both sides? I know we ran into logistical issues on Hazel, drives me crazy.
I'm not an engineer, I drove down it to look, it seems like it'd be a lot less challenging than Hazel was.
That's what I was curious about. I know there's
But I don't know,
issues on Hazel.
have to get it engineered.
One more issue I heard about was speed on Hazel Street. I think we need to figure out how to mitigate that, either with policemen on duty or maybe a speed bump in there.
Traffic circles.
Traffic, no.
Speed bumps, speed bumps.
For traffic circles.
But I think it should be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of streets with speed limits that get ignored,
Well,
and I think our police department does as good a job as they can.
okay,
But it certainly is an issue. Hazel's an easy one to get going too fast, especially down the hills,
you know,
as Vermeer Road is, especially down the hills.
so going into the new development, it's all downhill till you get to that big rock, that Park Lane.
All down.
I think the speed issue on Hazel would be more from Elm Street to the south,
Well,
because it's pretty long, straight stretch.
I guess without putting something up there to measure it,
Yeah.
I won't know exactly.
Paul, are you listening?
Farther south, it is just a little wider, isn't it? When you go south of,
Elm.
Elm. I don't know.
I don't know.
Very wide
I don't-
street, so,
I don't know if it's the same width.
I don't know. It's not a wide street.
So what do you need from us tonight, Mike?
We just need concurrence that you're in agreement that we're gonna work with the comp plan, Bob, on the alignment, Hazel Street, over Hazel Street, we're gonna work with the developers and we'll hopefully have a revised phase two, or I call it phase two, plat two, very soon for your review.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then
All right.
We're not talking about the future phase, but do we need to put the bug in the developer ears that 2 outlets into the future is gonna be important to us?
Yeah, we already have,
Okay.
we've shared the traffic analysis with them and they've been involved in this process and we've met with them, discussed these
Thanks.
issues.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
Can I ask one question? It's really not. Where would that east-west go? Is it on that map right there? Or is it north of that?
Jimmy's term.
I know, you tried to explain it and I'm very.
Well, the east-west connector that's shown in the current 2014 comp plan is sort of.
There's a maybe another slide, I think.
Down to what would be the south end of Timber.
Yeah,
And then cut over on Park Lane.
right, the one you're talking about, the.
We're just gonna look at a whole variety of options, whether or not coming down Hazel is the correct alignment, or maybe it comes more over this way to try to not drive it back to the north end of Hazel.
And see, that brings up East Park Lane is still not paved.
We understand that, yes.
Okay.
It needs a lot of work if it's gonna be
It
east-west,
does.
yes, understand
It's
that.
still not paved.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Marion County. Thanks, Bob. 28E zoning agreement modification.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, actually, while we have Mr. Beanstra here, we'd like to talk first, if you
Oh,
take
okay.
order and go to
Yeah.
I-3, please. This evening, what we'd like to, during this session, we'd like to talk about a mutual separation agreement with Beanstra and Kim for 2 projects that they're currently under contract with them on. One would be the indoor recreation sanitary sewer project, and the second item that we have is actually the library's HVAC project. And now a little bit of background on this: when Mr. Beanstra separated employment or left employment with Beanstra and Kim and started his own consulting firm of Greenwood Consulting, the city, with most of our projects, because we've worked with Bob for years and he has been our engineer for years, most of our projects went over to Greenwood Consulting at that time, with the exception of these 2 projects. From the city staff standpoint, with it, there has been, with that, it is a mutual agreement on both parties, and we think it'd be a better move for both of these projects to move these projects over with Greenwood Consulting as well. What's being proposed would be, specifically for these projects, would be the construction observation phase of it. So the projects have been designed, The newer sanitary sewer improvements at the sports park are currently under construction, so we're talking about construction observation services that would need to occur. The library HVAC project is scheduled for March of this year, and again, we'll have construction observation with that as well. We'd like to proceed with Greenwood Consulting. We've discussed this issue with Veenstra and Kim, and they're agreeable to the terms. The agreement that we listed in the packet, the important thing to keep in mind is that the agreement does not absolve or relieve Veenstra and Kim of any design potential limitations or errors on their liability is probably a better terminology if that were to occur. We don't believe that would be the case with these two projects, but that's always something to consider anytime you switch engineering firms. So before we presented formal consideration of this agreement, we wanted to make sure we addressed council's questions on this matter. So we're looking for feedback on this, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I thought I heard in there somewhere you said mutual termination agreement, so it's mutual.
It is mutual.
We don't cause any,
So the only question that I had, Mike, was that on the fourth whereas, it says that desires to have a different engineering firm that is local to the city. I don't know what local, unless Bob's planning to move to Pella. His grandpa's from Lighton, so that maybe counts. I don't know. But local to the city, is that good language to put in there?
Well, we can make modifications. I think when Veenstra and Kim drafted this agreement up for us, what we focused mainly on was the sections of the contract that dealt with liability of the design firm. And so we let some of the whereas, to be honest with you, we could go back and probably, I would imagine if we wanted to modify that statement.
I mean, it doesn't bother anybody else, it doesn't bother me. It's just that local to the city is a pretty connotation that somebody's living in Pella.
Yeah, I understand. That's one item we could go back to Veenstra and Kim with suggested changes as well, so.
okay, I don't hear anybody having an issue, so.
Thank you.
Okay, so now you wanna go back to the
Yeah,
2080?
Marion County.
Yep.
Recently, city staff was approached by Marion County to make modifications to the city's extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction that we have. And we'll show the map here very soon. Well, let's go ahead, Heidi, if we can go to the next slide and show the map of the areas that we have. Basically, up on the big board is we control the gray areas, or actually the yellow areas of the areas outside of the city of Pella. So the gray areas is corporate city limits. The areas outside of that gray area is, and the yellow areas are the areas that we have zoning jurisdiction through our agreement with Marion County. And basically, it's almost 1 mile around the entire city for the Marion County portion. Does not go over into Mahaska County, but for the Marion County zoning jurisdictions, it's just about 1 mile. And let's go ahead, Heidi, back to the previous slide. Marion County had 2 requests for us to consider. The first request was, if you look at that map, the previous map, anytime you draw a map and have boundaries on a map, there's always parcels that lie inside Marion County's jurisdiction and the city of Pella's jurisdiction. So they just wanted clarity when the city of Pella could defer zoning jurisdiction over to Marion County in the case of split parcels. This case, what it says, if it parcel lies 50.5% inside the city of Pella's jurisdiction, we'll take it. If it's anything less than that, then we have the ability to defer over to Marion County on it. So 50.5 or more, we have to take it. If it's less than that, then we have discretion on whether we kick it back to Marion County or not, or ask Marion County to be in charge of the development. The second item that they also requested was a minimum of 3-acre lots for parcel zone A1 in this area. That did not cause a lot of heartburn for the city of Pella. What's equally important to note is we've made this modification to the agreement, but they would also follow the city's zoning regulations in those cases with the 3-acre parcels. So ours are somewhat more stringent on those parcels, so we are agreeable to that. And then the third item is just some cleanup items that we've had on just recent state law changes. So with that, Mr. Mayor, before we presented this for formal consideration, we just wanted to make sure we asked any questions or sought feedback from the council on this item.
Okay. Anybody have questions?
The third item, allowing for appointment of, is that still up to mayoral rep, or it's not a requirement, it's just allowed, state law says allowed?
Yeah, I think what happens on those matters when it's an appointment from the county, what they've always done is they've always approved it through the county supervisors, and then we've always blessed it as well. So So, okay,
Diesel plant controls update.
I spoke too soon. So, all right. What we're here to talk about this evening is the control system on the diesel generating plant. We do have our electric director in attendance this evening, so if any questions are too technical or too hard for me, I'm going to be deferring back to Nate Spurgeon on this. But we do have a picture of the diesel generating plant on Washington Street. It's a 28 megawatt plant. And recently, I'd say over the last probably 90 days or 60 days anyway, we've had a considerable amount of operations out of the plant. It's been used to support the regional transmission system on the plant. For those of you that may not be aware, we receive what's called reserve capacity payments by Missouri River Energy Services. It amounts to about $1.5 million on an annual basis. And it's all contingent upon these units being in good operating order on this as well. Now, equally important to note, by getting that RCA agreement, we've also signed up through the transmission agency that oversees transmissions in the Midwest. It's called MISO on this. And we are subject to run by orders of MISO on this for regional transmission issues, and that's what our operations have been recently on this. Now, we are reimbursed for the cost of fuel on it, and we do make a profit for operations. So that is in addition to the $1.5 million that we receive from Missouri River. So let's go ahead and explaining this item. Now, what we're talking about is the system that actually operates the computer system that operates the diesel generating plant. And it's somewhat of a data system that we have at the diesel plant. And the diesel plant was constructed in the late 90s, early 2000s at that time. And at that time, there wasn't a universal system that was made by Caterpillar to support these units. So we had to have a third party design a system for us. And that's the way it's been since the inception of the plant. Now, in looking at this, the electric department does have some concerns on the existing system. They feel it's in need of replacement. So we have a couple options that we could do. Is we can continue with the re-engineered system that we have, but it's a third-party system and it would be unique to Pella, which means that in the future, as we have long-term employees that turn over and we ever need to run the system, or we're short on employees, we need to have a contractor operate the system. That system would be very unique to Pella, and it could present some difficulties under that scenario. The second option would be is to go with the Caterpillar system, and that would be a universal system, and that's a system that we feel more people would know how to operate the diesel plant on there. Now, obviously, when you look at the Caterpillar system, there's a difference in cost. The re-engineering system, we believe, would be about $650,000 to re-engineer the system. The Caterpillar system is about $1.5 million, but it's a more universal system as well. So let's go ahead, please, Heidi. I think we've covered this. Actually, we're just shy of about $1.6 million on this. Now, with the electric department and city administration, after looking at our options on this matter and considering that this is an essential services asset for the city of Pella, when you need to have the diesel plant, we need to make sure it's operational as well on this. And that was our vow. That's under contract with Missouri River to make sure it is operational. And plus, if we ever needed to run it for local reliability, we need to make sure it operates as well. And I can also attest, after seeing years of this, the city's greatest asset is our employees, but we have several long-term employees that have recently retired, and we have scheduled for future retirements as well. Operating diesel generating plants does not come naturally. It takes training as well. And if we ever got into a bind where we had to have a contractor come and operate that plant for us, it would be much easier under the Caterpillar system. So basically, our recommendation after looking at the options on this is to go with the Caterpillar system that we have, which is about a $1.6 million project. And so before we turn it over to questions, I know, Nate, I probably forgot something in that brief overview on. Is there anything you'd like to add or for council's consideration on this?
Well, I mean, what really it all boils down to is there's a Microsoft Windows operating system sitting on a PC that operates this entire diesel plant, and we're hedging our $1.5 million annual capacity payments on a Windows PC. And if you all have experience with Windows PCs, you have to kind of Fonzie them once in a while, especially when they get to be 10 plus years of age. And that's the point that we are at in our operations unit right now.
What would be a time frame to install this system?
If we could get this on the next city council meeting for bid for the contractor work, we could probably get it going after the summer big season, so September timeframe.
So to re-engineer needed to be redone every, what did it say, 8 to 10 years? how often does this CAT system need to be?
Caterpillar's is a hardened system, it goes with the engine unit, so it lasts the life of the engine. So they've got about 700 hours on them right now, and 100 of those hours were put on in the last couple of weeks. We were running from January 23rd to the 29th, and we put 93 hours on the system, so. But the life of the engines, before we need a major overhaul, is probably gonna be about 3,000 hours, so we're about 1/5 of the life of the engines.
This is just the control systems, it's not actually the engines or anything like that?
Right, this is, I equated to get like a new engine control module like a car.
Yep.
Basically what it is.
My son actually called me, must have been a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and said, Dad, the diesel plant is running.
Yep.
He heard it, he's like, I've never heard it running before. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, we put, those things are 23 years old, and we put 13% of the hours that are totally on those things in the last one.
Like I say, I noticed it running too. I wondered why. Is that just because lake level or what?
It was the cold.
Cold?
Yeah, the cold. I think all the economics of it were, wholesale markets were paying about 40 cents a kilowatt hour, and we could sell it for about 20. So it was just an economic decision for my son to have us run.
I'm up in Texas. That means 1.6 every new engine.
No, that's all 14 engines. 1.6 million?
When we have to do the new Caterpillar engine, does that mean, you said it was hardwired to the engine, does that mean you have to do this every engine as well? Am I not following?
Yeah, I'm not following what you're
Uh,
saying. We're not getting new engines.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
But we've got, you said 700 hours out of expected 3,000 on this engine.
Yep.
So this 1.6 is being invested in that, 20% used engine. Whatever that, Dave, you know that.
Yeah,
No,
you'd
I
say that.
wasn't.
So at some point down in the future, we have to buy the new Caterpillar engine for this. Does that mean we also have to buy the new hardwired?
Oh,
This.
the engine control module, that would come with the engine control. If
So
we
it's
were-
not an additional investment in these
No,
engines?
they're not two separate components, it's just like an engine control module attached to the engine.
And if we were replacing the engines, we wouldn't be talking about 1.6 million, would be my guess.
Correct.
No, I understand that, but I just didn't want to, is this an ongoing choice for us?
When we come- when we
It
come
comes with
to-
the new car.
When we come to engine replacement, it'll come with a new CP, whatever version of it they are, that, which hopefully is long beyond my career.
You said 3,000 hours for an overhaul,
Yes,
not a new engine.
correct.
So we got a lot of runway.
I'll be long gone.
I think it makes sense
Choose the right path.
to install this system, I think. It makes
Will this be
sense.
included in this?
Especially when the first item on the screen said something about it could happen anytime.
Councilman
That
Bass,
caught me
actually,
too.
fiscal years.
Which fiscal years?
It's in the current fiscal.
Oh, it is in the current fiscal year already? Okay. All right, good job.
Okay, anything else
Yeah.
about this? All right, proposed 26-27 fiscal year budget schedule, Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we do have the schedule up for consideration of the 2027 fiscal year budget, and that would be the fiscal year starting on July 1st, 2026, and extended through June 30th, 2027. Just a couple dates to point out of interest. At our next meeting, which will be February 17th, we'll be holding a policy and planning session on the max property tax levy for the City of Pella. Our budget work sessions are scheduled for March 30th and the 31st, and then the public hearing for ultimate adoption of the budget is tentatively scheduled for April 21st. So before we set these dates in stone, Mr. Mayor, we just wanted to make sure that these dates work for council or address any questions that council may have on this item.
Does everybody know they'll be around for the 31st?
Put it on the calendar. Don't plan to be in Arizona.
All right. Not hearing anyone having conflicts, so let's finalize the calendar. All right. Okay, anything else you want to point out?
just on, there's a lot of items that we have scheduled for February 17th, so some of these items may need to slide just a bit, but we're gonna do our best to hold as many to them as February 17th as possible. Just as an FYI, we will be holding a community center presentation on the 17th. The architects are 95% done with the plans and specifications, the design of the facility, so we're gonna be seeking council guidance on the community center project on the 17th. And we're also tentatively scheduled right now to hold a session on 215 Main Street as well. And that's in addition to the property tax levy that we have on February 17th, along with a few other items. So it's gonna be a very busy agenda on the 17th, and we're gonna try to do our best to pull this, but I'm prepping you just in case that meeting would run long on the 17th, so.
Okay. All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Support.
Bannister, Hopkins, all in favor, please say yes, opposed no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
David Fryland.
Yes.
Randall.
Yes.
Butler.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
We are adjourned.